Hello and welcome to the Castle Talk podcast, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds from Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming series Young Captain Nemo from Fievel and Friends Macmillan Books. Tonight, Connor Hoover wanted to be a wizard and wanted to time travel, but when that didn't work out, Connor wrote about time traveling wizards instead, and that's a lot of fun. Connor, who is with us, lives in Austin, Texas, with a couple of entertaining kids, some crazy but cute dogs, and a couple of everlasting tortoises. You can find out more about Connor Hoover at connorhoover.com, and I'm going to just call you Trisha because I know you as Trisha Hoover. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this because in the past, we've talked about your really wonderful middle grade adventure books, the Tut books, and those have gotten a lot of attention. But this is new. I mean, what we're talking about today is a new identity and a couple of new series, two different series, Wizards of Tomorrow and Alien Treasure Hunters. So just explain to me how all of this happened. Why are you in drag? And what are these two new?
I just found that, I love writing books. I love writing books for kids, and it feels like there's a really big gap right now as far as, we have kids who love younger picture books and stuff like that, and then we have kids who love novels, but there's all these kids in the middle who really are having they struggle at finding stuff to read because they're not quite ready to read the longer novels like the King Tut books and stuff like that. And so I'm, looking to fill that area right there by writing these shorter chapter book forms and just kind of writing about the things that I would love to read about personally, like wizards and alien treasure hunters and things like that. And so I just thought it would be fun to kind of create this, second identity and write these books and put them out quickly and really try to hit that market.
Wow. So I know that you're doing several of them at once. Like, let's start with Wizards of Tomorrow. But you is it more than one book that came out at one time in early 2018, or did you release the first and then another's coming along?
Well, I started writing the books in 2017, and I had 4 books written before I had published any of the books. And so then, at that point, I had books written. I had to wait for art to be, drawn for me or created for me because I'm not an artist as far as that goes. And so while I was waiting for that, I spent a lot of time learning a lot of the other skills that are required to do this, things like learning Adobe InDesign and how to lay out the books and learning, how to upload the books in both the print format and the ebook format for the Kindle and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of other things that I had to learn at the time. And so when I actually did publish the first books, I published books 1 and 2 at the same time at the beginning of January.
So that's interesting. Those are a lot of skills that, if you do middle grade novels like you've done and I've done, we've both kind of been in that world for a long time. None of that stuff do you have to worry about. You basically just write a long Word document, then you hand it over to somebody who does whatever formatting they do. But if you take this on, like taking on creating a whole series of books yourself, and they're aimed at elementary, so you're necessarily going to have art. There are all these skills that you just never have to mess with before.
Right. But, I did, Trisha, I did used to be an engineer in the past, and so I love learning new technology skills, and so things like, learning Adobe InDesign, to me, it was a great way to spend my Thanksgiving break. I enjoyed every bit of doing that. Because the other thing is, I'm learning a skill that I can use for other things in life too, not just for creating these books. I could help friends create their own books and learn to lay out books and stuff like that also. And so it's just a lot of fun to learn new stuff like that. I really enjoy that.
What just occurred to me is you've got these like brands, like, just think about that. With that skill, you could take now I'm getting into licenses you probably don't have, but you have your own Tut books, right? And they are middle grade adventure novels. But in theory, you could create elementary versions of them using all these same skills, and
Right.
and after that.
And I don't know if you saw on my website, but there's one book, it's called A Pick Your Own Quest, and it's King Tut's Adventure, and it's modeled after the Choose Your Own Adventure books that I know I read growing up. Yeah, and that actually, when the first King Tut book came out, I created that as free content on my website. And it was on my website for the last 4 years, and then I decided to turn it into book form and publish it under the Connor Hoover name. And so that is directly inspired by those King Tut books, and it's a direct tie-in to that, but it is in the choose-your-own-adventure format.
All right, explain to me first of all, what is Wizards of Tomorrow, and then what is Alien Treasure Hunters? Because I know both of these series are premiering at once, but
Right.
what are they? Like, what happens in them?
Okay, so Wizards of Tomorrow, that was the first series I wrote, and it's about kids who basically they pick up their phone and they download the coolest new game app because that's what kids like to do. But this game app sucks them into the future, basically. There's 4 kids. It brings them to the future, and they find out in the future that they're like the only 4 that actually have magic, and that these monsters have escaped and have destroyed the world, and they have to actually recapture these monsters. And so in each book, we're targeting a different monster that they have to capture and go about doing that. And so it's just like a lot of fun. It captures a lot of the elements that I love, which are video gaming. It captures, wizards and magical powers and monsters. And it's just stuff that I think, kids really enjoy reading. And so that's the Wizards of Tomorrow series. And then Alien Treasure Hunters, which is the second series, that's a lot of fun. I mean, these kids who live in Roswell, they're not friends when they start out the series, but they happen to run into each other at the junkyard in Roswell. And they find this old car, which actually turns out to be a spaceship, which takes them to a planet across the galaxy. And at this planet, they find out that, of course, evil aliens are trying to destroy the entire galaxy. And so they have to go around to these different planets and basically stop the evil aliens from doing what evil aliens will do. It's
Right.
just like a ton of fun to write about stuff like that.
No, I mean, I'm just wondering, this is a heck of a lot of, are you like constantly writing? Is that just sort of do you, I mean, I'm really curious about your process. How much do you write in a given week?
So I've been very motivated to write for these recently. I do try to write 2,000 words a day. I would say at least 5 days a week. On the weekends I don't do quite so well, but if you write 10,000 words a week, that's a lot of words. And if one
Yeah,
of
it
these books
is.
is around 15, 20,000 words, you're writing a book every week, every week or two, and then you spend some time revising it and things like that. But as long as you stick to it and you write a little bit every day, they actually move along pretty quickly.
Do you plan the story out in advance? Do you know where you're going? Like, do you outline, or do you just fly by the seat of your pants?
So what I've done so far is I definitely outline. I first come up with the basic concept of the book. So kids, let's say Wizards of Tomorrow, kids transport to the future through a video game and they have to fight monsters. That's the basic concept of the book. And then for each book, I map out the basic outline of, they start in their ordinary world, or how they start the book, what happens in the middle, the different steps they have to take, and then the conclusion of the book. And then I also try to come up with a cliffhanger, at the end of each book. And so I do all that before I actually start writing that book. And that it kind of helps keep it on target. And I think one thing about this chapter book format, and I don't know how much reading you've done of like books like Magic Treehouse or stuff like that, is the books are each different, but yet they're kind of all in a similar format. And I think kids like that
Hmm.
similar format as far as it gives them that feeling of like they can, feel comfortable reading the books. They can get excited about stuff that they know is going to happen, or they can try to guess what
Yeah.
stuff's going to happen. Yeah, and so it's a really fun format as far as writing. But yeah, I definitely have been planning out each book ahead of time before writing.
Do you find it's a different voice? I mean, middle grade has a certain sound to it. High school books have a certain sound. Do you have to change your tone to fit this kind of writing, or do you actually ignore that stuff?
I definitely have been focusing on, writing for that age group, and it's a lot like the middle grade, but it definitely is still younger. And so I think, you have to think about word choices that you're using. You have to think about the voice of the characters and how they would relate. But I mean, it's definitely, something that you don't want to go too complicated, because you only have about 100, 120 pages
Yeah,
to write the entire book. So you don't have an entire novel to get into all the, backstory and family issues and stuff like that you might in a
sure.
middle grade novel. Yeah, yeah. So, but I mean, like the Wizards of Tomorrow, each book is written from a different point of view for each of the different characters so far. So there's 4 books published, and each is of a different kid. And then for the excuse me, the Alien Treasure Hunters, it's going to be just one point of view at that.
Let me ask you something. I know that you do school visits down in Texas, but because we've definitely run into one another while we're doing the school circuit. What is the coolest thing that you've heard from a student that you encountered on a school visit?
So sometimes you think about some of those visits, and I know, some of the places we visited, we've been to some very, rural parts of the state and places, where the income level is pretty low and stuff like that. And sometimes you talk to kids and you feel like nobody's listening. Every once in a while you get an email afterward, though, that just kind of rocks your world. And I remember one time I visited a school down in Brownsville, down near the border, and I, didn't think anything about it, but I got an email from a kid the next day that just like brought tears to my eyes, as far as like, and it was a middle school guy basically, and he's like, I didn't want to say anything during, the presentation, but he's like, you inspired me so much, and I never realized you could write books and be an engineer and do all these other things, and it's like sometimes you stand up there and you feel like you're just talking. But it's important, I
Yeah.
think, to take a step back and realize that these kids are hearing you talk for the first time, and you really can make an impact on them. And I think that's our responsibility as authors when we go to these schools, is to really think about that. Yeah, we want them to have fun and be excited about our books, but it's also we're up there to be a positive role model.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because, Chris Barton was writing about going to the schools and trying to figure out, how do you present yourself? Do you present yourself as, I'm a person with a really cool job and you should emulate me, or I'm a person just like you? And all of us come into it from a different. I mean, I grew up in BFE Central Texas, so to me, the connection with those kids is, uh, I I I I was looking at exactly the same sort of life that you guys are. And this is a thing that you can do with just your brain and a computer and Adobe InDesign
Right.
if you're doing if you're doing what you're doing. And but really it doesn't it's not something that it's not like buying buildings. You don't need hundreds of thousands of dollars. All you need is just basically your brain to start putting stories together. And
Right.
and Chris was grappling with this. I'm not even sure what the question is here, other than he was like, some people called him a rock star because he's a New York Times bestselling author, and he was like, I don't want to go by that. I want to think of myself as being just like the students, except for that I'm a writer.
Right, right. And I think it plays into the fact that what we want to do is we don't want those kids to view us as somebody they could never be like. We want those kids to view us as like, wow, she did this. She never wrote as a kid. She didn't even like writing, and now look at what she's done, and I could do that too. And that's what we want to walk out of those. Yeah, because I remember I read his post also about that topic, and I found that very interesting.
Is that true, by the way? You didn't write as a kid?
No, no, I was not about the writing. I thought writing was very subjective and not fair. And maybe that's true. It's not fair. but it's that maybe that's part of why I've also decided to start creating these chapter books, because I can write what I want and bring them out on the schedule, and everything is kind of under my control, and so it kind of makes it all fair. So
Oh yeah, because you don't have to deal with the gatekeeper, finding an editor who's interested
exactly.
in it or whatever.
And
And
that's
for
one
that
thing.
matter,
Yeah, it's really
keeps
interesting as I'm
85%.
writing. Yeah. Well, and I'm writing the books, and you start writing a book like, let's say, Wizards of Tomorrow, and I remember I started writing this, and there's this voice in my head that's the voice of the gatekeeper saying, oh, do we really need another book about wizards? But yeah, this is fun, and the kids, I go to school visits and I've talked about these books, and the kids are so excited about these books, so they're thrilled for these books, and so it's nice to be able to kind of put that voice of the gatekeeper aside and write what I want to write.
I'm curious. I asked whether you wrote as a kid. So if you didn't, then what was the first thing that you wrote that you submitted to a publisher?
It was my book, The Emerald Tablet, which is first of a trilogy, a middle grade trilogy, and it's about kids with telepathic and telekinetic powers, and they were the powers I always wanted as a kid, and of course I didn't have them, and so it's fun to be able to write
But
about
that
that
was
stuff. But yeah, that was my very first book
as a full-on adult. That's really fascinating
as
to
a
me.
full adult.
I wow. I mean, I shouldn't be shocked by that, but I mean, I think I started submitting short stories to Twilight Zone magazine when I don't know. I mean, when I was barely old enough to type. I mean, I was failing spectacularly, and I failed spectacularly for another 20 years beyond that, probably. But, you know, but I remember there's never a time. If you time traveled back and asked Jason questions about what do you want to do, I think being a writer would have been my answer, no matter when.
Wow.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I didn't have your brain. The two new series, Wizards of Tomorrow and Alien Treasure Hunters, what do you have coming up? Are you going to do some more school visits, and where can people find out more about them?
Well, I don't have any school visits booked until May because we're getting into testing season, so it's kind of hard to visit as many schools during Texas testing season with the Texas standardized test. But what I am trying to do is get out to like one place a month and just get out there with the actual parents and readers and sell books there. So I know I'll be locally at a festival in one of the shopping areas here coming up this month. As it's called a Read and Rock Festival, and so there's rock bands and there's authors, which I think is a really awesome thing. And so I'll be there end of March. And then I'm actually really excited because I just got a booth at LeakyCon, which is a Harry Potter fan convention, which is going to be in
Oh,
Dallas coming up. And so I think Wizards of Tomorrow should be fun for that crowd.
that'll be
Yeah.
perfect. That'll be perfect. And where can people find information if they want to go learn about your work?
So I think the best place is just going to the ConnorHoover.com website, ConnorHoover, ConnorHoover.com, and finding the books on there. They're available on Amazon. There's also links through my PJ Hoover website that all the books are on there also, and they'll link over to the website. Yeah, so that's probably the best place
Wonderful.
is the website. Yeah.
Listen, I'm really thrilled to get a chance to talk to you again. I've always enjoyed your writing, and I'm kind of excited that these are some new books that are going to be. They're short, they're illustrated, they're adventures aimed at elementary graders, and I think that's super exciting. Connor Hoover, the new series are Wizards of Tomorrow and Alien Treasure Hunters. They're out now, and I am so thankful. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing, which is I am really looking forward to your Young Captain Nemo series. So as soon as I can get an advance reader of that, you know where to send it.
I've got to stop saying introducing myself as that stuff's coming because you realize I actually finally got a pub date and it's a year away. I do have something coming out this summer, but it's nonfiction, so it's not nearly
Oh, okay.
as strange. But that is so kind of you anyway. That is super duper kind, and I really appreciate
Hey,
it.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Bye.